Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today it is time to do my quite delayed June wrap-up just because I have not been filming in quite a while since I've been so busy. However, the June books that I read are still there, they're still calling to me, and I have yet to wrap them up on the channel, so I am here to do just that with you today. It's kind of a shame that I didn't get to talk about these books when they were more fresh in my mind because June was actually a phenomenal reading month for me. So I finished 7 books in the month of June, which is a good number for me. That's like probably slightly above average, which is awesome. But we also have the fact that out of those 7 books, I had 1 3.5-star read, 2 4.5-star reads, and 4 5-star books. It was amazing. So I loved what I read in the month of June. Like, it was fantastic. So I am gonna go through them from bottom to top. Actually, yeah, I think I can still do it that way, even though I have 2 that necessitate being talked about together just because they're part of the same series. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first book that we're going to talk about, because it was the 3.5-star, is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. So if you would like to hear like more in-depth thoughts and longer ramblings about this book, this was Angela from Literature Science Alliance's pick for me for reading BookTuber's favorite books in June. So I do have a whole video on this book. If you are interested in that, you should definitely go check that one out. But The Jasmine Throne, for me, I had like super high hopes for this one. So it was a slight disappointment in the sense that it was a 3.5, but it's still a solid and good book. So this is sort of like, this is the story of Priya and the story of Malini. They are our 2 main characters. And so Malini has been basically exiled and kind of imprisoned inside of a religious temple in the district of Ariani. And this is where Priya, our other main character, lives. And Priya was actually a child of this temple that Malini is being held captive in. But Priya is now an adult, and what went on in that temple and the magics that were there were overthrown when Priya was a child, and the people that lived there were burned, and it is quite sort of like a dramatic and traumatic past for her. But Priya takes on work again in the temple because there needs to be people to tend to Malini and her kind of like captor / overseer and the guards and everything. So that is kind of where our story begins, but this is set against a backdrop of a lot of political unrest because this district of the empire that Priya lives in is very subjugated because they used to be very powerful, and then the current empire kind of like tramped them down. And the current emperor, Malini's brother, is a tyrant. He seems pretty unhinged. This was part of him sending his sister away to be imprisoned because he just doesn't want her to be, like, he wanted her to be like purified by fire, and when she refused to be literally murdered, her brother imprisoned her. So that is kind of the starting point, the jumping off point, and this follows just a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like rebellion and acts of rebellion, and you have like groups of rebels in this area of the empire that are trying to take back their freedom. And in theory and on paper, this sounds like something that I should love, and I really appreciated a lot of the ideas in this book, but all in all, my favorite part was the relationship between Malini and Priya. I really enjoyed both of their characters, and I did enjoy the wider imperial politics, but some of the stuff closer to home kind of fell flat for me. Oh, the magic was also very, very cool in this one. It's sort of like an earth forest magic, and it definitely demands a price for a magic user, but the magic system was very cool, and I have positive things to say about this, but overall it just didn't hit for me really, which is why it's a 3.5 star. Okay, so next up we have the first 4.5 star, which is Dragonhaven by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Rainwilds quartet, and filming this video so late in July means that I've actually already read the next book in this series, and so going back and looking at Dragonhaven, just because Robin Hobb has such a natural progression between books, leaves me like sort of having difficulty remembering what reveals we had and what information we knew finishing this book. Like, I remember where our characters were in a physical sense, but not necessarily all of the information that we had or didn't have at the end of Dragonhaven. But I obviously greatly enjoyed this one, giving it 4.5 stars. Robin Hobb's writing just continues to be awesome. Like, I love being in her world, and I just loved reading her works. And this one was, because it was in June, I was very involved in the buddy reading, schedule and the Voxer chat and everything, whereas in July I had more trouble with that just because I had friends staying with me and stuff, in terms of listening to all of the messages as they came in. But Dragonhaven was one that I was very active in discussing, and I really enjoyed our discussion during this book just because of the physical progress being made by characters on their journeys combined with the emotional progress in this book. There are a few characters in particular that I feel like had leaps and bounds of development in Dragonhaven that I loved to see, and there was obviously conflict, and there are a few people getting what they deserve, which we always love to see, because one thing about Robin Hobb is she might make you suffer, but a lot of the time, eventually, people will get what they deserve. And so it's a great payoff. Now, this book felt very much like, the end of this book felt very much like a stopping point. Halfway through the series, we rest a little bit, and then we're ready to get into the, plot that's going to happen in the second half of the book. So I really, really enjoyed the ending of this one because I thought there was a lot of great resolution there. We had, in my opinion, a bunch of emotional resolution because we were kind of getting ready to go into the second half. We were resolving what happened on the journey up to that point, but there was still some remaining kind of turmoil to take into the final 2 books, of course, because you can't have everything resolved when the series isn't over. But yeah, I really enjoyed Dragonhaven, and so I would say that I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the next book, but I already know what happens in the next book, so I guess you will just have to wait and hear about it in my July wrap-up. Okay, so next up we are going to have the 2 books that need to be talked about together because they are the 4th and 5th book in Chorus of Dragons by Jen Lyons. So The House of Always being the 4th book and The Discord of Gods being the conclusion to this series. And I feel like what I have is actually kind of an unpopular opinion because I gave The House of Always 5 stars and I gave The Discord of Gods 4.5 stars. I still really enjoyed the conclusion to this series, don't get me wrong, but I think House of Always is, no contest, my favorite book in the series, and I think that that's an unpopular opinion, I'm not sure. But I think that the reason that I loved this one so much is just because she chose a setting and a structure where we really got to slow down and have some character moments and some relationship developments, because overall this series is pretty chaotic. It's well plotted and it's well thought out, but there is so much happening at all times. And I just really loved that in House of Always we got to still advance the plot. That was what was so impressive about this one to me. We were making some really important developments in terms of moving towards the end of the series, but the thing was, those were on the whole more emotional and more internally driven for the characters, and that just really, really worked for me. We also got some flashbacks, so it's not as though we weren't kind of having events happen, because we were seeing exciting things happen in the flashbacks of the characters, but when you get right down to it, the characters were all in one location together. And I just really enjoyed the dynamics that brought. Now, we also have the 4.5-star conclusion, and I really liked the way that Jen Lyons concluded this series after all of that buildup. I feel like this book was very much a whirlwind, though. Like, I don't really know what I can say about it, just because saying anything is kind of spoilers, but I'll just leave it at the fact that like I said, I thought that the whole series was well plotted and well thought out. She was balancing a lot of things and a lot of characters, but I thought that the ending was very appropriate. So like it had the right weight and it hit well for me, and I think that when it came down to it, I just didn't love this one as much as House of Always, reading it directly afterwards, and that's why it's a 4.5-star rather than 5. Okay, so the last 3 books I have to talk about are all 5 stars, so I can order them in any way I want, and I just decided that first we'll talk about A Shadow in Summer by Daniel Abraham. So I think I gave this a 4-star when I first read it, and this is a reread for me, and I loved A Shadow in Summer. Like, this is one of my favorite series, but the first time around, I thought it elevated with each book, and that's still true that it does, but coming back and reading A Shadow in Summer, knowing what happens in the series, just allows you to pick up on so much more that is just masterfully done, in my opinion. Like, it's very subtle foreshadowing, where it's not even like banging you over the head with it while you're reading it the first time. It's only going back and looking that you think, like, wow, this was the birth of like this theme, or this is just a little bit of a hint of the plot that's going to end up developing later down the road. But even more than that, it's going back and seeing these characters as they were first introduced to us and when they're so young, and just thinking about their arcs, and like, I don't know, I loved it so much. So it was definitely 5 stars on the second time through, and I don't even really need to say much more about it than that, because like rereading this for the first time is definitely a unique experience. And at this point in the month of July, I have not yet read Betrayal in Winter, but that is still on my TBR for this month, and I could not be more excited to reread that second book. Next up, we have more of a lighthearted read in some ways, and that is Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. So this, of course, is a like heartwarming series of graphic novels. However, this third one does take into account a few slightly heavier topics in terms of like eating disorders, and there's also a big focus on the idea of continuously coming out. Obviously, it's something that you do once to the most important people in your life, but they also consider the fact that in everyday life, you're kind of like constantly having to deal with that and deciding who you should tell or how you should approach it, and you know, random people that you meet, you're not out to them, and how do you deal with this kind of constant need to, like, it's not something that happens once and you're done. And I really thought that was interesting, and this was a cool backdrop for it because it's on a school trip to Paris, and so it's sort of like, it's not like they have free reign, but it's sort of like Charlie and Nick and their classmates having a little bit of freedom to go do some stuff in the city by themselves, and a little bit of friend group drama, but nothing too dramatic. But also the fact that there are some friends where they're not sure how far to trust them, and they're not sure who they should be coming out to and when. And then there is the idea of Charlie potentially having an eating disorder as well, and Nick being worried about him and just wanting him to be healthy. And so while they are still very cute and very heartwarming, I thought that the balance was great that this graphic novel took of bringing in some of those more serious topics as well. Then finally, we have probably my favorite book of the month, although A Shadow in Summer certainly gives it a run for its money, but they're just so different that it's hard to compare them directly to each other. But that is The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie, which of course is also 5 stars. So I loved this standalone so much. First of all, Joe Abercrombie's writing style and character voice style just lends itself so well to this type of story, which is essentially like one big 3 or 4 day battle with multi like POV perspectives, and you are balancing like both sides of the battle. Like you get perspectives from both sides, and you have kind of like primary characters that you follow, but you also get to slip into the heads of a lot of different people. And the characters that he chose for this are characters that you have probably seen in the original trilogy, but were not necessarily perspectives that you've ever seen from before. So it's very interesting in that sense, where you kind of feel like you know these people, but getting inside their heads is quite the different experience from just seeing them from the outside, and I love that about it. And you also have allusions to some of the very main characters from the original trilogy. I just love, like, I don't know, there's a lot of brutality and gore obviously in here because of the nature of the way Joe Abercrombie writes battles, but I just love the way that he balances it, because he doesn't do it gratuitously, in my opinion, even though there is a lot of it. It's more as though he does it in a matter-of-fact way while giving it the respect that it deserves, but it also depends on the character perspective that you're in, because every single character that you visit in here has a different view and philosophy on death and war and battle and strategy. And the strongest point of this book, and I know that many a person has said this, is that his character voices are so strong that you can tell whose perspective you're in without him telling you. And that is all part of that really vibrant characterization, is that every single person has a slightly different perspective on things. He doesn't conflate people with each other even when they're on the same side. And I don't know, like, this book was just so compelling. So I think that this is rivaling Before They Are Hanged for my favorite book in the First Law world so far. And I am so glad that I got the chance to read this. And soon I will be moving on to Red Country in the coming, well, definitely the coming week. I'm really looking forward to it. I think that The Heroes probably won't be unseated as my favorite standalone, but I think that Red Country could be like an underrated fave for me. I just have a feeling. Okay, so those are the 7 books that I finished in the month of June. As you can see, they were of very high quality, at least in my personal opinion. On the whole, I really did just love what I read last month, and that's all we can really ask for. And I think that this has gone to show in the momentum that I had coming into July, because I've been having quite the prolific reading month, actually, even with how busy I've been. I've just been enjoying what I've been reading lately, and I adore that feeling, and I wish that for all of you as well. So let me know how your June reading went down in the comments, or maybe tell me like your favorite book that you read, or what you think of the books I read if you've read them too. I would be so happy to hear from you. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. As always, I'll have my Discord and socials linked in the description below, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!